All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing along the Final Fantasy XIV path we have chosen to look at the Astrologian. Excuse me for just a second. Much better. So, just as a reminder, if you are enjoying this stuff, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All of those things really do help more people to get to see this. And I think that's a good thing. I think, and I have been told by other people in the D&D world, that this show in itself is kind of a unique thing, and I think more people should see it. I myself am, of course, completely unbiased in this idea. That being said, let's look at the Astrologian. So, again, just like every one of these classes that we to talk about when we're talking about this really cool thing called the 5th edition D&D Cross Final Fantasy 14 Classes and Races Compendium, patent pending. When we talk about all of those things, by the way, if you want to get this, there is a link in the description down below. Just click on it. It'll take you right to the subreddit. And the pinned post, the first one right at the top, will actually take you to all the versions of this. So, anyway, the first thing we have to do when we talk about these things, because they are heavily inspired by Final Fantasy XIV, is you have to kind of talk about how these classes exist in Final Fantasy XIV. Now, the Astrologian is one of the 3 healing classes. In MMOs in general, you have what's called the Holy Trinity. You have tanks, DPS, and healers. Tanks literally are there to tank. They are there to be the person that goes into combat first. They get hit by everything. They get hit by the most things. And so their builds are all built around the idea of them forcing enemies to attack them, using what most MMOs will, most people that play MMOs will refer to as threat. Because in EverQuest, that was what it was called. And I believe it's called that in a couple other ones as well. And that convinces bad guys to fight you, and then things to mitigate the damage. DPS stands for damage per second, and they just do lots of damage. Healers are there to keep people alive, and different MMOs have different ways that healers work. I actually have been a healer in 3 different endgame healer in 3 different MMOs. I first, in WoW, I played WoW for about 6 years straight. Then I took a while off, and then I played it for another year and a half. I haven't played since before the first patch of Battle for Azeroth. So I've not played the new expansion or anything like that. But my first introduction to endgame healing, which is a very different thing for every MMO, was playing a Life Druid. Or a tree in WoW. I then went to Star Wars The Old Republic, which I adored. I played a Scoundrel. I played the Han Solo type, but I was a healer. And so I literally got to pistol whip people and then heal. It was super fun. And the Scoundrel archetype that I used, I didn't get to use dual pistols, which sucked. But I got a personal cloaking device, so I was a stealth healer. It was super fun. And then I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and I didn't touch healing because I play Final Fantasy XIV using a controller. And every healer I had played thus far, I actually had a completely separate hotbar for my heals. In WoW specifically, I had to have a couple different add-ons specifically for my heals, or else I wasn't even allowed to heal. So I avoided healing for the longest time. I got to max level in Stormblood, and I wanted to start checking out some different classes. So I tried the Red Mage, and that was okay. But anyway, you know what? I want to pick up a healing class. I've never tried it before. I started playing the Astrologian, and then didn't play it again until after Shadowbringers, after I'd finished the Shadowbringers storyline. I started leveling it. And I was blown away, first thing, about how much fun it is to heal in Final Fantasy XIV. Second of all, I heal really well with a controller. Like, I had no problem doing endgame raids and stuff like that using a controller as a healer. It's not difficult. It just takes some learning. So the reason I tell you that is Astrologian is, again, a class I've played in Final Fantasy XIV. And Astrologian is actually an interesting class as far as healers go. There are 3 healers in Final Fantasy XIV. The first one is the White Mage. That is the traditional healer in Final Fantasy. All the way back in Final Fantasy 1, the White Mage was a class that could use white magic, which is primarily healing and status magic. So things like buffs, the things that cure buffs, healing, and then every so often they would get a spell like Harm, I believe is what it was called in Final Fantasy 1, that would allow them to attack undead. Eventually they made it so that undead actually took damage from cure and the cure line of spells. So they didn't need a specific spell to harm undead. And they would also get access to a spell called Holy, which was just a really powerful white magic attack. But generally, they were defensive. Final Fantasy XIV, they're really cool, and I can't wait to see how they are in this. But I haven't actually played one. The second healer class is, I think it's this. I can never remember. It's the Summoner. The Summoner in Final Fantasy 14 is weird because you start off as I can't remember what class it is you start off with, but when you get to the point, you start off as a class, and then you eventually get to pick your job, and you either get to pick Summoner or the other healing class that, for the life of me, I can't remember. So I'm gonna look it up. Yeah, come on, table of contents, not that hard. Is it the Arcanist? It's got to be the Arcanist. Arcanist, however you want to pronounce it. So, anyway, the thing with... there we go. The thing with the Arcanist is it's a pet-based healing class. And it's interesting, to say the least. Again, another class I have not played. So I'll be interested to see how it is in here. And then you have the Astrologian. Now, the interesting thing about the Astrologian is before it was added in Heavensward, there were only 2 healing classes, and they actually both healed in different ways. White mages were called hot healers, or HOT, which meant heal over time. White mages had quite a few abilities that allowed them to put a heal on someone, but then they would leave this residual heal that would continue to heal them for a little bit of time. In World of Warcraft, life druids are very much heal over time style healers. Most of the heals I dolled out were heal over times. It was very rare that I actually cast a straight healing spell. So that was relatively familiar to me as far as healing is concerned. Arcanists, on the other hand, are what are called shield healers. What it was they would be able to cast healing that would heal, but would also put a damage shield on the ally that they healed. That would basically absorb the damage until it ran out of hit points. And it's a very different healing style. It requires a different way of doing things, but it again works very well. The Astrologian, when it was introduced, one of the big things they were worried about is what happens if you get both a white mage and an Astrologian in the same party, because heal over times don't stack generally, and neither do shields. You're going to get one. So in large 8-man content, which is the smaller raids, what would happen is you would want to have both, because you'd have 2 healers. You'd want to have a white mage and an arcanist, because the white mage would put heals over time, and the arcanist would put shields on you, and they would synergize really, really well. Adding a third one, well, what was going to happen? Were they going to make it a shield healer? Were they going to make it a hot healer? And what they ended up doing is the Astrologian can actually do both. They have two different stances that they use in Final Fantasy XIV. You have diurnal, which effectively references the day, and nocturnal, which references the night. Nocturnal was the shield healer. Diurnal was the hot healer. And because of that, playing an Astrologian, you had to know what the other healers could do a little bit more than the other classes, because you couldn't have both sets on at the same time. Generally, there's an ability you get later that lets you do stuff like that, but for the most part, you had to choose one or the other for the dungeon in general. You could technically switch anytime you're outside of combat, but you don't. So the Astrologian had to go, oh, I have a white mage? Okay, I'm nocturnal. Oh, I have an arcanist? Oh, it looks like I'm going diurnal. So that was the kind of cool thing with the Astrologian in Final Fantasy XIV, was it was super good at playing with other classes. Now, when Endwalker comes out, they're introducing a new healer in the Scholar, which looks super, super badass. It heals with lasers! I'm super pumped about it. I will probably be switching my healer from Astrologian to Scholar, depending on how they play. Though I may play both, because Astrologian's a lot of fun. But with that, they're actually going to change Astrologian to be a hot healer, and then Scholar is going to be a shield healer. So they won't be able to switch anymore, and it'll be interesting to see how they make Astrologian feel unique when they've taken away one of the big unique things about it. But so anyway, that's what the Astrologian is in Final Fantasy XIV. They use plane spheres, and and globes, which are basically just these things where they have cards and they draw cards, and different cards do different things. And it used to be a lot more complicated where each card would do something different. Now they've basically changed it to half your cards will buff one half of the type of people in the party, and half your cards will buff the other half. But that's kind of how you play it in Final Fantasy XIV, is you sit there, you draw cards, you buff the correct person at the correct time, and then you're also putting off heals and things like that, and doing damage. It sounds complicated, but once you get into a rhythm, it's not bad. As far as how's that going to translate into D&D, which doesn't have specific roles like Final Fantasy XIV does, let's see. So first things first, the overview of the Astrologian. It's a D8 hit die, just like just about every other healer in the game. It gets no armor proficiencies, so it doesn't wear armor. Weapons is actually kind of unique, because most classes get simple weapon proficiency, which is basically all the simple weapons they can use. This one has very, very specific ones. They get daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows, which is a weird combination of stuff to give them. I'd have to remember. I think the where are you? I think the wizard is another one that gets very, very limited. Yeah, they're kind of the same thing. They get daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, light crossbows. So effectively, it has literally the same proficiencies as the wizard. But it also gets divination deck as a tool proficiency, which divination deck is a unique thing to the Astrologian. So yeah, for saving throws, they get wisdom and charisma, which kind of makes sense. Though, I'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into the actual class features, but I kind of would have liked to see this as an intelligence-based class as opposed to a wisdom, which the other kind of traditional healers in D&D are druids and clerics, and they're both wisdom-based. And the one other quote-unquote healer you can have, though it's not really built for it, but you can definitely do it, is the bard. Can be a pretty competent healer, and that's charisma based. So Yeah, I would have liked to see this as an intelligence-based class, but, you know, whatever. And then skills, choose 2 from Arcana, Deception, Insight, Persuasion, History, and Religion. Again, none of that really that big a deal. It is a little bit interesting that 3 of the 6 skills you can choose to be proficient in are all intelligence-based. 2 of them are charisma-based, and only 1 of them is actually wisdom-based, which is going to be your biggest thing for this class. So I actually... Yeah, I kind of wish this is an intelligence-based spellcaster instead of wisdom. Just because the wisdom equals healing is done a little bit to death in D&D. As far as equipment, you start with Dagger, Star Globe, Divination deck, and then you choose between an Explorer's pack and a Scholar's pack. None of this stuff is really that crazy, but that's the way it is. On to the actual class features at level 1. Now, before we get into the actual class features, I should do my generalized reminder of the things, which is my 5th edition class design refresher. In 5th edition D&D, all the classes are designed to play very, very differently right from the beginning. And the way they do that is by utilizing these things that we call defining features. Defining features are things that are either exclusive to the class itself or are somehow unique to the class, whether they get it earlier or whether they can use it in a way that no other class can. Those are what we call defining features. In order for something to be a defining feature, it has to show up within the first 2 levels. So what are the defining features of the Astrologian? Well, the first thing they get at level 1 is spellcasting. And I wouldn't really call it a defining feature. It's not really that special. The Astrologian is a full spellcaster. So that means they have more spell slots than half-casters. And they get spells all the way up to 9th level spells. They follow the same progression as all their spellcasters. It's pretty basic. They start with 3 cantrips. They eventually can learn up to 5. Again, not that crazy. For preparing casting spells, they're wisdom-based spellcasters. As far as learning spells, they don't actually learn spells. From what I'm looking at here, they literally, when they prepare spells, every morning, change your list of prepared spells when you finish a long rest. So basically every morning, they have access to the full spell list of the Astrologian. They can just prepare a certain number of spells every day, identical to a cleric. Literally everything they say here is almost identical to the cleric, all the way down to the wisdom-based spellcasting. So nothing that crazy. And then they can do ritual casting, and then their spellcasting focus, they can use a star globe, a planisphere, or other similar tools as arcane focus, which should be foci. So again, star globes, planispheres are new things for this particular class, but it just treated as a spellcasting focus. So yeah, that's their spellcasting feature. It's the same as every other spellcasting feature. Nothing to do too crazy. However, also at level 1, you get draw, which is their only defining feature, but it's a biggie. Draw is actually the name of an ability in Final Fantasy XIV, which is a defining ability of the Astrologian there. Basically, you have a deck of tarot cards, effectively. They call it a divination deck. It's tarot. Fun fact, I believe tarot is copywritten and trademarked, which is why it's not called a tarot deck in Final Fantasy. Tarot is a brand name. So this is a divination deck, but effectively you draw cards from the deck, and you can use them to buff your allies effectively. The specifics are this. As an action, you're able to draw a card from your deck of 60 and empower an ally according to the drawn card. Roll a d6. The number show corresponds to the drawn card. Once drawn, you may apply the empowering effect to yourself or another creature within 30 feet that you can see. The card releases the energy within, and the card returns to the deck. The effect of the boon lasts for a number of rounds equal to your wisdom modifier with a minimum of 1 round. You must use temporary resources within this time, otherwise they're lost. I'll explain that when we talk about that. A creature may only have one draw effect affecting them at a time. I don't know why I enjoy this so much, but they say specifically a creature may have only one draw effect affecting them at a time. And a lot of people don't know the difference between effect and affect. Effect, E-F-F-E-C-C-T, is a noun. It describes a thing, so the draw effect. Affect, A-F-F-E-C-T-I, A-F-F-E-C-T, is a verb. When you affect something, you are affecting it. It is a verb. It's something that you do. So the effects of global warming is an E. Global warming affecting something is an A. Sorry, as a language nerd, I really enjoy that. And the fact that they use both of them right next to each other, I think is really funny. And I'm the only person in the world that finds that funny, but there you go. So anyway, creature may only have one draw effect affecting them at the time. A new effect replaces the old effect. And then it goes into the actual draw effects themselves. We'll go over those in a second, but let's talk about the draw itself. So, first things first, drawing is an action. Because this is a full spellcaster, that means your big decision when you are playing this class is whether you're going to use your action to draw a card or cast a spell. Drawing a card is going to be something you can use on yourself or your allies. All of the effects are really interesting. So even when you're getting 7th, 8th, 9th level, access to 7th, 8th, 9th level spells, the draw effect is still going to be something that's going to be useful in general. Like, you're never just going to get to the point where drawing is never a thing. Now, as a limiting effect on draw, because of how powerful it can be, you do have a limited number of draws you can have per day. Now, it says the available draws column of the Astrologian table shows the number of times you can draw cards from your Astrologian. It says level, it should be deck there. Soren, if you're watching this, page 39, the second column under draw, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down, third line of that paragraph, the far left one. It says you can draw cards for your Astrologian level. I think it's maybe I'm just reading it wrong. Anyway, the wording is poor there, so you may want to look into that. You regain all of your expended uses of draw when you finish a long rest. So you start off with 2 draws at level 1. You get an additional draw for every level. The only thing I don't like about this is at level 20, you have 21 draws. And I don't like the 21-20 thing. I don't know why. It just annoys the heck out of me that it's 21 instead of 20, to the point where I almost want you to get at 19th level, you just get 20, and then at 20th level, you stick to 20 draws. It just doesn't look right when everything else stops it to 20 for this to go to 21. There's no balance thing behind that. It just doesn't make a ton of... I don't like it. It doesn't work for me. From a visual and from a thinking process. Now, the funny thing is, 21 is an important thing when you're talking about playing cards, specifically for blackjack. But other than that, there's no significance to the number to 21. So yeah, that's the only thing is I really want it to be 20 draws instead of 21. I don't think it would unbalance it to have 21. I don't think it'll unbalance it to have 20. 21 seems very, very weird in 5th edition. All right, enough about that. So, yes, you have a limited number of draws per long rest. So choosing between whether or not you want to cast a spell or draw a card, because it is a limited resource, they should be pretty powerful, and they are. So let's talk about the draws. The way it works, again, you roll a die, a d6 specifically, and whatever number lands face up, you can use to affect a creature within 30 feet of you. So it can be cast on you or can be cast on someone else. These are the abilities that you have. You roll a 1, you get the balance card, which is a bonus 1d6 damage on all damage rolls. This bonus damage applies once per action, attack damage roll, bonus action, and reaction. This increases to 2d6 at 5th, 3d6 at 11th, 4d6 at 17th. Now, this specifically is worded kind of weird because it says the bonus damage applies once per action, attack damage roll. But in order to make an attack damage roll, you generally have to use an action to do that. So by saying both an action and an attack damage roll, you get a little bit confused. I think what the intention here is, if you are dual wielding, let's say, and you get this, your attack action, let's say you're a fighter that's dual wielding at 5th level, so you have the extra attack action. So what happens, you can attack twice. With the balance on, you would get a plus d6, or technically 2d6 at that point, but you would get bonus damage on the first attack. You would get bonus damage on the second attack, and then when you do your offhand, you would get bonus damage on that as well. And then if, for whatever reason, you make an opportunity attack, you could also use the balance on that as well. This is designed to effectively be every single time you attack or roll damage. So if you were a wizard that got this and launched Magic Missile, every one of those, well, it does specifically mention attack damage roll, not damage rolls in general. So let's change that up. Let's go to a warlock casts Eldritch Blast at level 5. Because they have 2 different attack rolls for it, that would and damage rolls from that, you would be able to get the bonus damage multiple to the times. Because of the specific wording attack damage roll, something like Magic Missile, which is a super exploitable ability if you want it to be, would not get the additional damage because there is no attack roll when you do magic missiles. All the missiles automatically hit. So because there's no attack roll, you would not be making an attack damage roll. You would just be making a damage roll. But yeah, so it's interesting to say the least. With it saying attack damage roll and not just flat damage roll, that would also rule out the things like spells with save effects. So this would be something that you want to give to people that are making attack rolls. It could be worded a lot better if that's what it's intended to be. If they would replace that action, attack damage roll, bonus action, reaction, if they just wanted to change that so that anytime you make an attack roll, if they wanted to change it, all they would need to do is say this bonus damage applies once per attack roll. If the attack hits. That's all they would need to do, and that would cover everything, and it would leave out any abilities that do automatic damage, any abilities that require saves or anything like that. I think that's what they're intending. So I would say change this to from a bonus d6 damage on all damage rolls. Just get rid of that part and change the effect to read a bonus 1d6 damage. Change the whole thing actually to say When you make an attack roll and hit, you can roll a bonus 1d6 damage on that attack. That would limit it to just its attack rolls. It would mean that every time you make an attack roll, you're going to be able to do it. So it helps with it works with dual wielding. It works with reaction attacks, works with multiple attacks. So I think that would be a much cleaner way to say it, because the way it's written right here is very confusing and could be interpreted a couple different ways. So yeah, so that's 1. 2 is the bowl. By the way, if you're wondering where they got these names, these are the names of the cards you can actually do to draw in Final Fantasy XIV. And they have cool artwork and everything. So, number 2 is the bowl. All damage you take is reduced by 1d6. This increases to 2d6 at 5th, 3d6 at 11, 4d6 at 7th to 13th, which is really, really nice. Again, the bowl is going to be most effective against multi-attacks effectively. So anytime you're dealing with creatures that are making physical attacks, generally their physical attacks don't get super, super powerful. What happens is they get multiple attacks. And so the bowl will be most effective when dealing with someone that's generally going to be fighting in melee with other creatures. Though, again, because this is all damage, anytime you take damage, you're going to be reducing the damage from it. So things like magic missiles from the enemy. This is going to every single time you take damage, which each missile is a different set of damage. If you're being attacked by multiple enemies, each one is going to do reduced damage. It's a really useful ability. If you roll a 3, you get the arrow. You gain 1 extra attack when you take the attack action. This is where things start getting interesting, to say the least. We talk a lot about action economy in 5th edition. The reason being, action economy doesn't technically change. There's not a ton of things in 5th edition that allow you to add or remove actions. And the things that do are built around that idea. It's the reason that fighters get extra, any weapon-based class gets extra attack. There's no way, even with magic buffs and magic weapons and things like that, there's no way for a creature with a single attack action to be effective basically after about halfway through tier 2. With just a single attack. You will be almost useless. So extra attack is really important. And then fighters, their entire class is built around the fact that they get even more extra attacks. They can attack up to 4 times from a single attack action by level to 20. So when you have an effect that allows you to basically add actions to your side, it is insanely powerful. Now, this is limited in the idea that it is basically just a single additional attack, which is effectively the same effect you would get from getting the haste spell cast on you without all the other benefits of haste. So it's not massively overpowered, but this is not something that you can ignore as far as just how useful it is. And the fact that you have to give up an action in order to give an action away is a good limiting factor for it. It does eventually change. We'll talk about that when we get there. If you roll a 4, you get the spear. Your attack rolls crit on a 19 or a 20 die result. Another thing, really, really useful. Expanded crits are really useful. This is another thing that is extremely useful on either characters that get a lot of attack rolls, which most people will think, oh, fighters, paladins or weapon-based classes in general, dual wielders. But something you need to not ignore is warlocks. Warlocks get Eldritch Blast. It's one of their bread and butter things, and depending on how you build your Warlock, it can be your main damaging ability, because it can get really powerful really quickly, especially when you combine it with things like Hex, which just adds additional damage. So making sure you give the expanded crits to classes that are going to benefit from it. So anything that gets multiple attacks. Rogues and paladins, because they burst and do crit damage really, really well. Stuff like that. 5 is the Ewer, which is EWER. Temporarily provides 1 level 1 or 2 spell slots. May be used for a level 3 spell slot beginning at 11th level and a 4th level spell slot at 17th level. This is another thing that, again, your mileage will vary depending on your party makeup. But something that people may not be considering because they think spell slot. Oh, spellcaster is Paladin Smiting. Paladin Smiting basically giving them an additional smite that they can cast at first, second, third, or fourth level is really, really nice. Because a 4th level smite, a normal smite at using a 1st level slot is an additional 2d8. A 2nd level spot is 3d8. A 3rd level is 4d8. A 4th level is 5d8 additional damage. This effectively allows your paladin to smite a lot more, as long as you're willing to trade draws for smite damage, which is a pretty damn good trade. So yeah, and then always, the idea of being able to cast more spells is always is useful. Again, the Astrologian can cast it on themselves, and that can be very beneficial for them. Finally, at 6, if you roll a 6, you get the Spire. Temporarily provides 1 non-spell slot resource to an ally. This increases to 2 at 5th, 3 at 11th, 4 at 17th. Specifically what they're referring to, they list in here amongst key points or a fighter's maneuver dice would be something that they get from the Spire. They do specifically state this does not include abilities which do not use a resource, such as a cleric's channel divinity or a fighter's action surge. There must be an expended resource. So we've talked already, most of the Final Fantasy XIV classes have a resource. The Spire would work for those. For things like monks, sorcerers with their sorcery points, because they mention fighter's maneuver dice, I would probably say this would also cover Bardic Inspiration, because it's a limited resource. Anything like that would work. But things that wouldn't work, clerics get multiple uses of Channel Divinity, but it's not a quote-unquote resource. The same would be true of a Barbarian's Rage. They can use it multiple times, but it's not an actual resource. It's an ability they can use multiple times. It seems like a weird line to put in the sand, but it is an important one, because giving out multiple Channel Divinities to clerics is a recipe for overpoweredness really, really quickly. The same would be true for paladins. Being able to give druids more wild shapes would be a very bad thing, because it completely unbalances the classes. So I understand why they did it the way they did, and I think it's a good way to do it. So that is 1st level, and that is the defining feature of the Astrologian, is this draw. Everything else about the class is going to be based on how that draw is going to work. At 2nd level, you choose your archetype. There are 3 archetypes. We'll be doing a different video for each one. They are Nocturnal, Diurnal, and Fortune Teller. And again, they're based off the diurnal and the nocturnal aspects of the Astrologian in Final Fantasy XIV. And then Fortune Teller is effectively what the Astrologian is pitched as in the game lore. If you do the Astrologian quests and things like that, you find out that the Astrologian himself is a fortune teller kind of the thing. But as far as actually getting fortune telling abilities or anything even remotely similar to that in Final Fantasy XIV, they don't. There's nothing that really feels like you're a fortune teller from the mechanics of the class. It's all the lore. The actual mechanics, you are much closer to just a card using spellcaster that has an astrological theme to it. But to give you an example, all the class sets have this very fortune teller vibe. The class armor sets for the Astrologian. I don't wear any of them on my Astrologian because I don't like that fortune teller vibe. You know, big flowing robes and like headpieces. It just seems really weird to me. But they have a thing you can get at the Golden Saucer, which is their minigame place in Final Fantasy XIV, that is effectively Setzer's outfit from Final Fantasy VI. It's called the Gambler's set. And that's what I have my Astrologian wear. Is it basically makes me look like this really cool card shark kind of character. So the idea that there is a subclass that actually leans very heavily into the fortune teller aspect of it, I think is really cool. We'll see how it works when we cover them. We're not going to cover those in here. So that's second level. Next, fourth level, you get your ability score improvement. We've talked about with every single class. Yeah, it's the same with everyone. Either increase 2 different ability scores by 1 ability score by 2, or pick a feat. Next. At 5th level, you get Shuffle. When you use the draw feature, as a bonus action, you may re-roll the result of the d6 before applying its effect. You may only use the new result. This is really, really useful for a number of reasons. Probably the biggest of which is... we mentioned when we were going through them that there are certain cards that are going to be very beneficial for certain things. And we've already talked about you can only have one of these benefits on you at a time. If you get a card that you can't use on someone, like maybe you draw the balance 3 times in a row, but you only have 2 people that can really use the balance. Well, that effectively means the best you can do with it is basically refresh the duration on someone. Which feels bad. Now, with the fact that this is using a bonus action to do that, I'm not 100% sold on that. As it is now. When we get to another thing, it makes sense for this to be a bonus action. But as of right now, part of me would want it just to be something... I would much rather Shuffle be a limited... usability, like tie it to your wisdom modifier, where you can do this a number of times instead of using your bonus action for it, because that means if you use Shuffle, you can use your entire turn doing nothing but drawing a card and putting its benefit out there. And one of the nice things about things like Healing Word is if you are drawing, meaning you're sacrificing your ability to cast a spell that turn, you can still cast a bonus action spell. And I like that better. So I would have to see how it works in playtesting, but I would almost say change Shuffle from a bonus action ability that effectively has no limitation to you can use this a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, or tie it to your proficiency bonus. Just because proficiency bonus gives you more uses and provides more steady growth. Compared to wisdom modifier, which you will have maxed out generally by 8th level at the latest. So it will never get better after the 8th level. Sometimes if you roll well, you'll have it maxed by 4th level. So, yeah. So that's Shuffle. At 11th level, you get Spread. When you use the draw feature as a bonus action, you may set a drawn card aside for later use adding it to your spread. You may have a number of cards in your spread equal to your wisdom modifier. On your turn, as a bonus action, you may play any card from your spread. The cards in your spread lose power when you complete a long rest. So spread completely changes how you play the class. Because up until that point, you have a choice between drawing your card and using your action to cast a spell because you are a full spellcaster. With spread, you can have up to 5 cards sitting in your spread before combat even starts. So in between combats, you literally, the best thing for you to do is spend a total of 30 seconds drawing 5 cards, because by 11th level, you will have a 20 wisdom modifier, which gives you a +5. So you can have up to 5 in there. 6 seconds per action. So 6 times 5, 30. Take 30 seconds to draw 5 cards, put them in your spread. And then during combat, draw is no longer an action. Spread has effectively changed draw into a bonus action, which does change things dramatically. I mentioned before, the draw effects needed to be powerful to be able to justify giving up your ability to cast 9th level spells to do them. With spread, you no longer have to do that. Once you have spread, if you are drawing cards in combat, you have done something wrong. Because at most, you can spend 1 card per turn, or 2 if you want to use both your action and bonus action to do cards. You can draw for 1 action, and then bonus action, you can use a card from your spread. But in general, you're only going to be using 1 card per turn. Most combat does not last longer than 5 to 6 turns. Most combat is over much, much faster than that. So the likelihood of you ever running out of your spread cards becomes moot. You are never going to run out of your spread cards as long as you keep them full between combats. And because it only takes you 30 seconds to re-up them, there's no reason you should ever go into combat without 5 cards in your spread. And that massively changes how this class plays, because now they have a bonus action buff that is better than any action spell in the game. As it is, I can't really justify spread, especially since you already have shuffle, where it allows you to kind of pick a better card. And the way it's written right now is you get to pick a better card for free. So when you are prepping your spread outside of combat, with shuffle having no limitations whatsoever, you can sit there and just keep redrawing to make sure you have every single card you need in combat. So yeah, spread itself, as it is written, I don't like. I think a really simple way to fix spread so that it doesn't massively change the balance is I would say spread would almost make more sense as an upgraded shuffle than it is as this way to effectively replace draw. So more along the line of, instead of you could have a number of cards equal to your wisdom modifier in your spread, change it to you can have 1 card in your spread. You can keep a card saved to use later. That means your first round of combat, you're always going to have that bonus action card. So you can use your action to cast a spell and your bonus action to do whatever card you have draw. Because you have shuffle, which again I think should have a limited number of uses. Because you have shuffle, that means outside of combat, when you're using spread, because again you're not limiting it to combat here, and it really wouldn't be that beneficial to only have it work in combat. It allows you to use shuffle if you need to. Otherwise, you just spread. You have a card waiting for you. When you get into the game itself, you can use that card or you can draw. And then as you're going, if you don't want to burn your shuffle, you pull up a card that you can't use right now. You don't want to burn your shuffle. You can spread, which doesn't have a limited number of use. You can just only have one card instead of up to 5. You only have one card there. That would keep the class balanced. It would still give you something you can do, which is a little bit more in line with how the Astrologian plays in with how the Astrologian plays in Final Fantasy 14. Because the way draw works in 14 is you draw the card and then you get to keep that card until you use it. So a lot of times in between combats, you will draw a card so that you have it there. And then when you get into combat, you will use that card. You will immediately draw again. Then you will use that card so you can get 2 draws off within the first couple seconds of combat. So yeah, as written, spread breaks the class completely and makes it massively powerful. However, if you limit it to one card instead of multiple and you keep shuffle to a limited number of uses, it becomes a much more balanced class very quickly. At 17th level, you get double draw. When you use the draw action, you may draw and use 2 cards. Each card consumes an available draw. As a bonus action, you may place 1 or both cards into your spread. Again, this is this changed how draw works because it still uses your limited resource. It's not, again, not completely broken. But again, if we change the spread, we also need to change double draw to where you can only put 1 of those cards into your spread because your spread maxes out at 1. With double draw, this is another thing that I still think it needs, again, because of how powerful the draw effects are. And the fact that you need to make the choice between drawing and casting a spell. When we start adding to every single time you draw, you can actually draw 2 instead of 1. It makes it that much more extremely powerful, and I think double draw should be another one that's limited. This one, not even to like your proficiency bonus or anything like that, because with the other things, I think double draw should be a twice per long rest type thing. Just again to rein in the class a little bit, because again, when you combine double draw with spread and shuffle and all these other things, you have this class that draw is effectively this bonus action ability that outclasses most action abilities. So yeah, that's my thought. At 18th level, you get Time Dilation. As an action, you may expend an available draw to reapply a draw effect on a creature within draw range. This I like exactly how it is, because if you do need to re-up something, which again, with the fact that by this point it lasts for 5 turns and combat doesn't last for much longer than 5 turns, Time Dilation is not going to be getting a ton of use. But by the time you get to 18th level, you are going to be facing tougher creatures that might take 6, 7, 8 rounds of combat. So giving the ability to, instead of hoping that you get the right card to ensure that your dual wielding paladin is getting all that extra bonus damage, or your fighter is getting all that bonus damage on all their attacks, or my personal favorite, your monk that gets 4 attacks every turn is still getting their 46 extra damage on every single punch. Being able to use Time Dilation to refresh that is really useful. But again, it's going to be an extremely limited thing, simply because combat doesn't last that long in 5th edition generally. So when you are using to the time dilation, it's going to be clutch situations. So that would be my only thing. And it is nice that you effectively, instead of hoping that you draw the right card with time dilation, you just get to, okay, we're going to re-extend that. Because theoretically, casting the same card on them again has the same effect as to the time dilation. It's just you're a slave to the odds at that point. Whereas time dilation, you get to extend the thing that you want to. So I think it's perfect the way it is. And yeah, it's going to have very limited uses, but when it is useful, it'll be very, very useful. Finally, at 20th level, you get to the Deck of 60. When you roll initiative, you recover a number of available draws equal to your wisdom modifier. I have talked about these things over and over and over again because a lot of classes have this thing where you just get stuff whenever you roll initiative. And in base D&D, that doesn't exist because it's really easy to be abused, especially if you're doing something like a dungeon crawl. If you're going through combat and combat's never getting beyond, 3 rounds, which is very, very common in a dungeon delve. It may not get past 1 round. You are effectively getting 5 draws every time you roll in an initiative, because by 20th level you definitely have a 20 wisdom. You have to. It is your spellcasting modifier. You're basically just giving them 5 draws. It turns a limited resource into an unlimited. Again, the way that it should be is when you roll initiative, if you have no draws available to you, you regain a number of them. And because they get more limited resource than literally every other class in the game, I'm going to say don't tie it to the wisdom modifier. Just give them... because of how powerful draw is, I would say give them 2. Because that means every combat, they're going to be able to buff 2 characters always. They're never not going to be able to buff to the 2 characters. And those are going to be significant buffs. If you combine shuffle and spread and everything, they're going to have a really good chance of getting what they need. If you want to argue with things like double draw and stuff like that, I could argue going up to 3. But if you compare it to what a monk gets, they get 4 key points at level 20 if they have 0 key points in their pool. A monk can spend a key point to stun a single creature for a turn, or get 1 additional attack. An Astrologian can use it to cause up to, if you have a fighter that's dual wielding, up to 20d6 extra damage for 5 turns. So that's 100d6 to the damage. They don't need any more than 2. So again, I understand why this is a thing, but this, again, it turns a limited resource into an unlimited resource, especially since with spread, you can burn off your draws before you get into combat. Unlike other classes where, like, if I'm a monk and I end combat with 1 key point left, like my Shadow Monk, if I have only 1 key point left, I'm not really going to be able to burn it before combat. So I'm going to go into combat with just a single key point and then miss out at being able to get 4 key points. Because a single key point is too low to be able to cast a spell with it. Really, the only thing I could do would be Patient Defense, maybe before combat starts, or Step of the Wind, so I can run around real fast right before combat starts. But yeah, so with Deck of 60, it should be changed to when you roll initiative and you have 0 draws left, you recover 2 draws. Anything other than that is going to be super, super unbalanced. So, Yeah, that is the class itself. So, final thoughts. Overall, one of the things with this class is the subclasses are going to give you additional ways to use your draw, which is going to massively change how you play the class. So being able to form like a full opinion of the class based on just hearing the base class is nearly impossible. Simply because, again, the subclasses change the class so much. However, that being said, overall, the class as it's written is really overpowered. Not at the beginning, but once you get to 11th level, basically once you get into tier 3, this shoots past all the other classes to being massively overpowered as it's written. In order for that not to happen, Shuffle needs to have needs to be a limited ability. Tie it to either wisdom or proficiency bonus. I prefer proficiency bonus just because it's a more even progression. You don't have these big spikes and then it just levels out. It keeps getting better. Spread needs to be limited to one card in your spread. Yeah, if you have multiple cards in your spread, it massively unbalances it because it allows you to use draw as a bonus action instead of an action. And the main limiting factor of the draw ability is the fact that you have to choose between drawing and casting a 9th level spell. So if you take that away, this class becomes crazy. With double draw, it needs to be a limited ability as well. Again, with that one, I think limiting it to twice per long rest makes perfect sense. Once is never a good idea. Just doing it twice is always better. Time dilation is perfect the way it is. And then Deck of 60 needs to be changed to when you roll initiative and you have 0 uses of draw, you recover a number, you recover 2 draws. Because you really don't need any more than that. Again, you get 21 draws every day for a 20th level Astrologian. You don't need 21 draws plus 5 every time you roll into an initiative. You're just, at that point, you're completely broken. So yeah, that's my view on the Astrologian. In the comments down below, let me know your thoughts on a card-based spellcaster. I have been trying to come up with my own, not like an Astrologian, just like a literal card magic subclass. And I've yet to come up with a mechanic that works really well for it. But I like that idea of a character that has, Gambit-style character that has cards, and when they draw them, they're able to invoke abilities based on the card they draw. I think that's really cool. So let me know, what are your thoughts on card-based? What's your thoughts on card magic? And if you were to play an Astrologian, would you lean much more heavily into the I am divining the future, or would you lean a little bit more into pick a card, any card? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that is all for me today, and I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.